Hi everybody, welcome back to Ethereal Art Studio, where I'm an artist, you're an artist, we are all artists. My name is juanscribe, and today I want you to paint with me. Today we will be painting David Lynch's 1984 sci-fi classic, Dune. We're going to be painting the giant sandworm and Paul Atreides. So come on, paint that giant worm with me. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
Alright, so let's get started with some burnt sienna here, and I'm going to use some yellow as well. And I have a 3/4 flat brush that I'm going to use to mix those paints together to make a yellowish brown that I'm going to start using for the back skyline. We make long brush strokes from side to side, easily moving from the top of the canvas downward, adding a little bit more yellow. You can play around with it too and move it back and forth between colors in long brush strokes. And the point is that as we descend, we get lighter. So here I have some white that I'm using. I wash the brush and I dry it pretty well. I use some of that white, add it straight to the canvas so that we can continue to lighten up. Okay, so after adding all those colors to the sky, I finally wash the brush. Then I add a second coat so that it can be richer and stronger. But I waited about 10 or 15 minutes for the first coat to dry. Now I'm going to make a sand color. So I'm going to mix some of that brown, the burnt sienna, with some white and yellow to make a sand color so that I can start to make the dunes at the bottom of the canvas. They don't have to be a perfect line. In fact, they should be bumpy and mountainous so that it could reflect the dunes in the movie that make up our horizon. Okay, so we'll be going back to those dunes later, but for now we wash the brush once again. I'm still using my 3/4 flat, and I get some burnt sienna straight up to start painting our main attraction, the big sandworm of Arrakis, one of the sandworms. So we just make the outline first, and it gets kind of wider as it goes higher because the worm, the head of the worm is closer to the camera. It's taking the picture, so it looks larger than the bottom, than the base. Then we fill it in with some of that same burnt sienna, and then we start making a shade of burnt sienna that is darker by mixing it with some black paint, just a little bit. So we can start making some shadows on this creature. So I'm sticking to mostly one side of the sandworm so that it can reflect the shadow being on one side that is not facing the sun, right? Now, here I'm mixing some red and yellow to some burnt sienna that's already on my brush to make a orangey burnt sienna color mix so that we can add some more details, some more. This side has more light hitting it. Right, the sun is more on that side, so you add some light, the opposite of the shadows on the other side, and here and there, as you can see. All right, so let's go lighter now. So I'm gonna add more yellow to this mixture that I'm making here. I add more yellow, and now I'm using a number 10 flat, so I went smaller now. And I'm gonna use that to make light that is hitting the monster light that is brighter now. So these hints of light are brighter, as you can see, and they're not everywhere. They're just hitting certain parts. Okay, so now let's add a little bit of white to our paper plate, or the surface that we're using. Let's take our brush. I just washed it a little bit and I dried it fairly well. So then I make a separate mixture that, as you can see, it's creamy and it's much brighter because it has white in it. So I'm using this to add hints of light that are really bright now. Okay, so let's add more color to the body of the worm. So as you can see, I add a little bit of white to this mixture that I have already, and a little bit of red too, and it comes out to like an orange color, it's like a salmon orange. And I use that to add some more color over here on this left side. Well, this is the right side of the worm. Our left, but the worm's right. We add a little bit there, not too much paint. You don't want it to be too heavy. You add what is just a little bit, and then you kind of spread that out on the canvas. As you can see, I haven't gone back to get more paint. I simply use what's on the brush, which is plenty, and add it here and there just to give more color to this piece. After which we can then make a dune of sand that is closer to us, that is in the foreground. So we mix some burnt sienna and yellow, and we add a dune that is partially covering the very bottom of the worm, and we fill it in after we make the outline. Now, it's only the first layer, so it's going to be translucent. We need for it to dry in about 10 or 15 minutes. Then we add a second layer, and then we'll add a third one after 15 minutes after that. But before we do that, let's use our smaller of the two brushes that we've used, and let's mix a little bit of black and some burnt sienna to make it dark burnt sienna, to add some of the curved lines to one side of the worm's body. We'll add lines to the other side later that will be darker, but for now we're going to stick to this side that has a lot of light and add this burnt sienna black mixture. And we'll also add a little bit to the inside of the mouth. Let's go ahead and use some of this dark mixture that we made to add some shadows to this inside, this maw of this worm, so that it can start looking a little bit more realistic. Let's add some shadows that will start to really bring the painting to life. And I'm gonna keep on using this brush without going back for more paints. I mean, it has paint already on it. I'm gonna stretch that out as far as I can. So I'm kind of extending it to where it's the side that has a lot of light, and bringing that paint on that side, so it has a little bit of shadow on its belly, on its underside, and it's all paint that is already on the brush that I'm simply carrying over. So now I'm going back to my big brush, my 3/4 flat, and I'm adding another coat of paint over here to this dune that is on the side, but it's still translucent, as you can see, so I'll go back to it later. But for now, I'm going to mix a little bit of red and yellow once again to make and also a little bit of white, as you can see, make a very light yellowish color that I'm gonna then add to the worm to add more light that is hitting it. And this is with the smaller of the two brushes that I've used up to this point. Okay, so we're getting there, guys. So I washed my brush and I dried it really well, and I'm gonna use black straight up to add some really dark shadows to our creature over here. as well as the corresponding black lines on this side of the body. Okay, so now using my number 10 flat brush, the smaller of the two brushes that I've used up to this point, I'm gonna make a very light color that is a mixture of some of the colors that we have on our plate, and it's white mixed with some of the burnt sienna mixtures that we have before to make something very, very, very light, as you can see, to add some details to the dunes over here at the bottom of our canvas. Yeah, it's simply light hitting those sides of the dunes. All right, so now we're gonna do something really cool. We're gonna add some electrical charges. So let's mix yellow and some water, some drops of water. As you can see, it's very watery. You also want to control it so that it doesn't drip, so you kind of get rid of some of it on the side over here. And let's add some red, a little bit, just a hint of red, so that it could become an orangey, very wet and transparent or translucent color that we're gonna add to make the glare of the lightning. We added going here and there, those lightning strikes or bolts. Electrical charges are going in all directions, but you still don't see the actual bolt. You just see, this is the glare. So you just see the glare around each of those electrical charges. So once we add those, let's wash our brush and dry it really well. And then we're gonna mix yellow and white, more white than yellow, so that it can be very, very bright yellow that we're gonna use to draw or paint the lightning bolts. And we're gonna go smaller, so we need a detail brush. So here I have a detail brush, and I'm gonna use that to very carefully and slowly add these lightning bolts. And now back to our what is a medium brush, because it's between the other two in size, to make a slightly darker shade of that yellowish color. So I added a little bit of burnt sienna to it, just a little bit, to make it slightly darker, to add some light that is hitting this dune over here. Back to the detail brush. So that same color that I just used on that dune to add light, I'm gonna use that, but I'm gonna add drops of water to it to make it very light and thin, so that I can add these baleen teeth, these teeth inside of that worm mouth. And all they are really just lines, like tiny little lines, broom-like hair structures. And I'm gonna add some that are fully white, so they could be a little bit more visible, but only on this side, as you can see, where the light is hitting them, not in the darkness of the inside of the mouth. So let's wash that detail brush, dry it really well. Let's go for black. Let's paint our hero over here, Paul Atreides, played by Kyle MacLachlan. A great movie with a great cast, right? He's raising his arm in victory, riding that monster in the desert. So the movie, right, speaking of the cast, has a great cast featuring Sean Young and Max von Sydow, and also Sting of the Police, among others. So let's add some more characters running towards Paul and the worm. So they are basic stick figures, but the rule is that the heads are small, and you also want to add more substance than your traditional stick figure to the torso. And the legs are longer too than a traditional stick figure. So the farther they appear from us, the smaller they are, obviously, and the less details they need to have, really. So I have some here in a line, and some are closer to us, some are very far away. Some are barely visible and barely have any details at all. All right, so we are getting there. We are almost there. What I'm doing here is simply adding some sand, some dust that is translucent, that is all around these men. But I waited for them to dry, because otherwise it will blend with the color that is already there of them, right? Their color. So instead I waited for them. Here I'm adding some more burnt sienna to this corner so they can be darker. It looks like the spice melange. This looks orangey and rich. And here I'm taking some burnt sienna again, just by itself, and some water. Again, you know I love water to make paint more workable. And I'm adding some dust, some sand that is all around the bottom of this worm, since that worm is moving with ferocity, and it's creating dust that is rising up. I can add a little bit of white to it too, to make the dust that will be seen in front of the worm. You want to make it more visible on the actual worm, so you could add a little bit of white so it'll be brighter. So now I'm gonna add shadows to the men. So I mix some burnt sienna and black to make a dark burnt sienna, which I'm gonna use to add shadows on each of those guys. They don't have to have too many details. And after that, you can initial or sign your painting. You could add any quote to it. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Thanks so much for painting with me. I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to see how your painting came out. Our information is in the description box. And also check out etherealartsstudio.com and visit our Etsy store.